All right. Okay. You get that sound synced up because, that's how I roll. We got this far in all classes today. Some key reminders here what mercantilism is. You're going to hear about mercantilism from now through the revolution. It's this economic system, y'all, that kind of grows out of feudalism and precedes capitalism. It replaces the system that is based on only owning land with one based on owning gold or silver, what we call bullion. And then, of course, here was the song Silver and Gold that I didn't get to play for first period. Now, colonies, y'all, this is going to be the economic driver. This is the gold part of gold, glory, and God that's going to drive all of these colonies, whether it's British, French, Dutch, Spanish, or even Russian, y'all, to come over here. And so mercantilism is this idea of having the most gold, valuing it so it can buy your armies and ships. Now, what you want to have is all of these things being supplied to you. Mercantilism, y'all, depends on having colonies because you want to keep the gold and silver in your colony. So what you would do here is this cartoon shows you that I reproduced at the bottom of page 6 of your notes is you have the mother country here, very well fed as mother countries tended to be, or parent country if you want to be more politically correct or whatever. And here you see the colonies serving up everything. They have gold and silver. If they don't have gold and silver to ship over, they have various foodstuffs, whether it's fish or that could be salted and taken back, raw materials like lumber or, lumber or various things like sugar cane or whatever that could be produced into finished goods. Now, these things will be shipped to the mother country. You can pretty much only sell to the mother country because that's how it works under mercantilism. And then when it's made into finished goods, sugar, chairs, or whatever, then of course you, the colony, have to buy it from the mother country at the prices they want. And you're not really allowed to create your own. And as I said, this is going to be one of the big reasons for the American Revolution, the economic reasons, the fact that we're having to sell to the mother country, England. We're having to buy stuff only from England without paying very, very high taxes. And this cartoon here, y'all, does a good way or has a good way of showing kind of how these go. So basically here you would make stuff for the mother country. And it is, as it shows you back here, y'all, at the very bottom and early. There's your silver and gold. Now you're getting it. Early form of capitalism. All righty. Okay, so let's go to joint stock companies now, y'all. Joint stock companies, and as you can see, the three things that they provide, foodstuffs, gold and silver, raw materials, markets, and all of that. But the next thing is specifically called out in your AP curriculum. Now, joint stock companies, y'all, and as I said, specifically mentioned the AP curriculum, these are the ancestors of today's multi-gigantic mega corporations, right? Now, think about it. If you and I were to start an individual business and it failed, we would be liable for all the debts. Maybe let's say it's a restaurant, all the food we bought, workers' pay, all that kind of stuff. And we would be seriously in debt. I mean, the banks might come for, you and me, the house, the dog, the cat, the wife, whatever, right? So you would risk your entire fortune in it. Well, the joint stock company was a brilliant, brilliant idea. Rather than you or maybe you and me risking everything we have to finance a voyage or to finance maybe a settlement like a Jamestown, instead, you would get lots of people to put in just a small amount. In return, they got a share of the success of that colony. And we call it a share. You literally get a piece of stock that says you own part of it. And here we see an early joint stock company, people getting together, investing their money. Now, the thing is, if the voyage were successful, if the colony were successful, you get a percentage of the profit. Let's say you own 10 shares and there's only 1,000 shares. You now own 1% of the company and you would get that percentage of the profits. On the other hand, let's say it fails. Let's say it's awful. Well, what happens then is you're not out very much money. And ultimately, y'all, these joint stock companies or corporations are going to discover something called limited liability. And the way that will work, and this is what makes corporations possible. If a corporation goes bankrupt, yeah, the corporation might owe money, but they're not going to come after you and me and the stockholder and say, hey, Mr. D, you own 10% of this Enron company. You also now owe 10% of their liabilities. It doesn't work that way. The maximum amount of money I can lose, the liability that I am limited to, is the value of my stock. I might lose everything in my stock, but I cannot be held liable. Okay. And this method, and here you see an early example, y'all, of a type of stock, okay, with the various seals and everything on it. This was used particularly by the British, whether it was for Plymouth, the Pilgrims, whether it was for Jamestown. This was a very effective way. The British government didn't have to invest much money, y'all. They just relied on other people doing it. And this is how Britain on the cheap, or England on the cheap, y'all, paid for it. So I can't, mention that enough. And so the thing is this is not in your handout here, but when this is all over, you can see how the Americas have been colonized. The French take what is called Louisiana and New France. The British have this little area around Hudson Bay, and you can see this tremendous area that Spain would come to control. And the Portuguese, this little island here, or not island, coastal area, would come to control Brazil. Okay. And you see some of the, the crops are the things coming out of it. But this is, of course, the part of the world that interests us. So let's go to the part here on the Spanish. Okay. Now, we're going to talk here in a little bit about this caste system. You have the notes there. Now, this initial period of exploration is going to be followed by a period of conquest of the Indians. When we talked about Cortez, we talked about how that was possible, that a small group of Europeans, guns, germs, and steel, could defeat these other folks. They're going to engage in what today, they didn't call it that, but what many people today call genocide, where you intentionally try to wipe out a group. I don't know if they intentionally tried to do it, but the effects were almost as if they did. Now, with a lot of them dying, the Spanish are going to realize, hey, we need these people to work, but also to be converts to our particular branch of Christianity, Catholicism. Now, ultimately, as you guys will see here, a racial hierarchy that is sort of like a pyramid, like the one I talked about in class today about feudalism, except instead of it being based on land, it is purely based on your race and where you were born. Now, at the very top are the peninsulares. These are people who were born on the peninsula. And the peninsula we're talking about is the Spanish peninsula, right? The Iberian Peninsula, where Spain and Portugal are. Because of this accident of birth, they are at the very top. Later, as you can see in your notes, I have a diagram for you. You have the Creoles. They are the second highest rank. Now, they're white, like the Spanish, but they had the bad luck to actually be born over here. Bless their hearts, right? Not quite as good as Mama and Daddy, who were born over in Spain. Now, very, very important one, and this used to be called out on your curriculum, are the people we today known as mestizo. Mestizo means mixed, okay? They would have usually a European dad, particularly a Spanish dad, and an Indian mother. And their child was of mixed blood, hence that term. Now, by the way, I do want to mention there are some people who might be offended by the term mestizo, calling people mixed, but that is the term that was used then, as well as another one that I'll mention later. So be careful. Some people don't like the term, but it is today, y'all, what the majority of people of South America, Middle America, and Mexico are. There are some that are pure Indian today. There are some that are pure Spanish background, but the majority of people we call Mexicans and South Americans today have a mixture of European and Indian blood in them. Now, where did everybody else go? Well, the mulattoes, and once again, that is definitely a term that I would not use in polite company, but it was used at the time. Race was a very, very big deal. You think it's important to us today? It was even a bigger deal back then. Mulattoes, y'all, were people that were a combination of black and European, or black or and Indians. And then people that were, quote, pure black or pure Indian, they would be found at the bottom. Look at the size of this empire, y'all. It's huge. Up here, this area was mainly, and going up into Alaska was Russian and ultimately British. So here is the casta or caste system that they had. I am asking that you draw it here and understand it. Peninsulares, born on the Spanish Peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula. The Creoles, people who were mom and daddy were Spanish, but they were born here. Okay. Mestizos, like I said, that's a term some people don't like. Mixed blood, usually Spanish daddy and Indian mama. Okay. Mulattoes, usually, like I said, a mixture of black and Indian, black and Spanish. Like I said, a lot of people don't like that term, so be careful. But you could mention it if you had to write about it. And then finally, y'all, the native Indians would be there, and Africans who had been brought over here and enslaved. They would also be on the bottom of this casta system. They made this a really, really big deal here, y'all. Now, I'll talk a little bit more and I'll show you guys some pictures of the casta system in just a bit. Now, let's go to the encomienda system. As I have highlighted for in bold here for you, the Spanish colonies marshaled Native American labor. That is a term you guys need to know. When you marshal it, it means usually kind of by force. I'll show you some pictures there. They marshaled, forced Native Americans to support this plantation and also to work in mines to find the gold, to find the silver. Now, as the name suggests, encomienda, it is a Spanish system. It is specifically mentioned in your curriculum, in the framework. So it's likely you guys will have a question or two about it. I think you already did on that district test, but just in case, please make sure you know it. And there. Now, here's the Costa system. It looks like I kind of have stuff out of order. This is actually from one of your books. And this is sort of from a diagram, y'all, showing all the different rankings of people. I mean, look at it here. This is, I guess, is a Moroccan with a Spanish child or China or child, and you got Spanish. I mean, and then when we look at it here, this is the full chart, literally showing you all the different rankings, of people here. I mean, it was a big deal. Okay. And sort of a close up here. You got a Spanish and a Spanish person, it looks like here. Here you see that term, okay, where you've got a white and a black and a kid there. I mean, this was a big, big focus of theirs, okay? So, like I said, don't ever believe this is just something that's in America. They really, really made a big deal. How you were born, y'all, I mean, it determined your rank. And since I mentioned that, that's why America is going to be so attractive to a lot of people, y'all. We had our faults, right? But the British are not going to be as hung up quite a bit on this. If you come over, you're going to have, unless sadly you are an enslaved person, you are going to have a lot more freedom to move up and around. We're not going to penalize you because you happen to be born here than over there, for example. And then here's just some more of it that shows you all the different possibilities. Like I said, they were hung up on this stuff. So more about encomienda here. Now, what's going to happen is the world views of each group is really going to be challenged. Now, the way the encomienda worked is the Spanish crown would give, a specific number of Indians to, say, a mission to have them work either in the mines or to work growing food, and they would be, quote, civilized. Okay, here you see quite a graphic picture here where the Spaniard is using a whip here on an Indian woman while the Indian men are forced to kind of work over here. All right. Now, in theory, the way this was supposed to work, y'all, they would protect the Indians. Now, from whom? Maybe other Indians that were mad that these people were cooperating and working for the Spanish. Or maybe it was traditional enemies of them. Also, it would instruct them in the Spanish language. They could learn Spanish, which of course was a key to maybe some type of movement. They would convert them to Catholicism and save their souls. And you and I might kind of, oh yeah, save their souls while killing them. That was a big deal. Remember, they truly believe if you're not of the one and true faith, you're going to burn in hell forever, which, as I've said before, is a long time. So they would convert you to Catholicism and save your soul. What would the Indians get? They would learn to work and get honest work. Remember, especially the Europeans believed that the Indian men were lazy. Because remember, the Indian men, all they did was hunt and fish and fight, where the Indian women did the hard work. So this would be, quote, honest work, making them into it. And later, y'all, when the United States finishes defeating the Indians on the plains in the 1870s, 1880s, Indians will be put onto reservations. And we're going to have something called the Dawes Act. And the Dawes Act, it isn't as brutal, thank goodness, but it too, y'all, was about assimilating Indians, making them learn English in this case, becoming Christians, and also eventually becoming farmers and making the men into, quote, honest workers. And it's going to fail pretty badly. Now, here's a picture of the encomienda system. I'll later zoom in it a little bit. So in theory, that's what it was supposed to be. What was it in actual practice? It was virtual slavery. It was some of the harshest forced labor that you can imagine. Remember, they used the term, they marshaled. That means force. Like, I'm not forcing you. I'm merely marshaling you. Oh, good. I feel much better now. Extreme punishment if you resisted, maybe even death if you didn't do what you were supposed to. And of course, among the things they did, I know it's kind of hard to see here, I outlined it, but sugar, silver, extraction from mines. Gold was a little bit harder to find. These were some raw materials that would use encomienda labor. Okay? And ultimately, y'all, it did, whether you and I like how they went about it, and I can't possibly like it, it was successful. If you wanted to make these natives into Spanish people, speaking Spanish, people who were Catholic, this brutal method was successful. The English don't have this success because they just pushed or killed them. They didn't, enslavement didn't work very well. The French don't really have the numbers to pull it off, but they do convert some people. But nobody has the success that the Spanish do. Sadly, it comes through this very awful, awful system. Some people would call this, if it's not genocide, in killing you physically and wiping you out. In a lot of ways, it's cultural genocide because they take your culture, they take your beliefs and they purge them. They try to get rid of them to make you into something else. This is forced assimilation, word you'll hear more about. And a lot of the Indian culture would be lost. Now, later, when we look at Pope's rebellion, we're going to see that the Spanish did begin to incorporate or use some Indian beliefs into it, or, quote, tolerate some of those Indian beliefs. But anyway, so there you go. Now, here's that picture, and it's in Spanish, right, appropriately enough, and it's the best one that I've seen. So when you look at this encomienda, you see everything going on, all right? I want to point out this one back here, and then I'm going to zoom in a little bit in some places. The Templo Azteca. This had been an Aztec temple. The Spanish, y'all, literally demolished. They took apart the temples. And, I mean, you talk about changing somebody's culture. You demolish their temple, then use the stones from the temple to build maybe the iglesia, the church, right? So you're literally building on top of their beliefs, using their own, structures against them. So let's zoom in here. There we see that Templo Azteca being dismantled, right? You see some of the rocks and stuff there. There you see the Spanish port. Fortaleza, right? That is the fort in case anybody came there and allowed them to get the stuff out of there. Okay, the monastery here for the priest, right? You see all that? And then let's zoom in here and you can see basically the houses of the Indians, right? The indigenous people here. Now notice they didn't get to live inside over here like the Europeans did. They lived on the outside. So much for protection, right? But maybe they can come running in if they get attacked. So there you go. Now let's look at the bottom here and you can see that forced labor. You see, the man on the horse here, remember something that the Spanish had brought over. You see these people carrying whatever. And then here you see, a guy with dogs. Dogs were terrifying, y'all. They were much bigger than what the Spanish or what the Indians had here. And you see the trabajos forzados, basically the forced labor, right? And that describes it pretty well. Now, I do have this, and I didn't put it on there, but Diego Rivera, y'all, was an incredible Mexican artist, and a lot of his art are murals. Mural meaning painted onto a wall, and I've been fortunate enough to actually see this mural down in Mexico, Mexico City. It's there, right in the capital where Congress meets, and it's called Conquista. All right. Now, when you look at this picture, and I mean, it was fascinating to stare there. And I remember our guide pointed out some things. It's sort of a history of what that conquest was like. Here you see Cortez up here. Looks like he's forced some people here, and he got his priest back behind him. Some of this is cut off, y'all, because it's so ginormous. But let's zoom in here to Cortez. All right. Look at here, these guys having to pay him. But look how Cortez is portrayed, y'all, as this almost alien type figure here with a green head, and of course he's wearing turquoise taken from the Indians and stuff, and he's backed by all of his soldiers and everything. They're giving him gold there, obviously suggesting that this man is like an alien or satanic or something. And let's zoom in on the encomienda part, the forced labor. If you look back here, you see them carrying logs. You see the priest here. Not a very flattering view, right, of how the Spanish ruled the Indians. You see the forced labor here. You see a whip being used. You see them working in the mines. You see them carrying things and cutting down trees to be used, of course, to build Spanish sites. Now, the downfall of the encomienda system. Now, on the good news, y'all, as far as how people are, many Catholics began to really protest the treatment of these Indians. Not everybody thought this was cool when they began to hear about it back in Spain. And the one name more than you should know, I've got the little picture here, and I've got who is this priest? What did he argue? His name was Bartolome de las Casas. All right. Bartolome of the houses. So, as I always say, the stupid joke, casas in the casas, house in the houses. But anyway, he was a priest, and he actually had accompanied Columbus on one of the voyages, and he was just ashamed as a Christian what was happening. And he wrote some of the documents that we have today that really, if we didn't have, we wouldn't know the extent of the cruelty that happened in many cases, y'all. I'm trying to fix a speaker here that's kind of loose. But anyway, he kept track of these in his book, The Destruction of the Indies, and even mentioned, like, for example, Hispaniola had like 250,000 Indians on it. Within 50 years, they were down to like 50 Indians. I mean, it was great, destruction for sure. Now, what did he argue? He's going to argue that these are people of God, these Indians of people. These Indians are people of God, and they should be treated as such. Now, another thing to mention here too, y'all, one of the things that's going to cause the encomienda system to fall, besides Spanish criticism of it, is the fact that Indian women began to marry, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes I hate to say not voluntarily, began to marry Spanish men. Their children, you want to be fancy, their issue, or issue, as the Brits would say, they could not be forced to work on the encomienda system because they weren't Indians anymore. They were something else. All right. And this painting here, I've seen a lot of things here. You see the Native American woman. She's probably smiling, I hate to say, because her status has gone up. Being married to a Spanish man, whether Creole or Peninsulare, has given her more status. But even better yet, this little cute child, looks like a maraca or something they got there, a little rattler. This child of theirs cannot be forced to be a worker. Okay. And I've seen this on AP test before, this picture. And so let's look at her. Oop, her husband, I guess he doesn't appear on there. There we go. They're gone. Sorry. But in time, y'all, this is going to lead to the decline of the system. The Indians that didn't intermarry, a lot of them died out by disease or by forced labor, where the others basically couldn't work in the encomienda system. And so gradually, y'all, there he is. He finally appears. Gradually, the system is going to be replaced by African slave labor. And I hate to say this about De las Casas. There's a lot of things that I respect about De las Casas, but initially, y'all, when he was opposing Indian slavery, he's like, oh, we don't need to use the Indians as slaves. We can bring over Africans. Later, he regretted that he had said that, but he suggested that. And so, remember, we're not all as perfect as we might imagine. All right, I didn't put this as a note, but please make a note of this on there, y'all. This is called the Valladolid, and I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, debates. This has been mentioned before, and it is off of your AP curriculum. Now, what happens between this contact between Native Americans and Africans and Europeans is going to foster this debate among the political leaders and especially religious leaders about how we should treat these people. In some cases, Europeans are going to say these people lack of being Christian is a reason for them to be enslaved, that we're saving their souls. Of course, it wasn't like, well, once they got saved, they didn't exactly let them go. And this is going to be used also as a justification for subjugation. There's that word again, of Africans as well, too. So in this town, they actually paired up De las Casas, representing, of course, treat the Indians as human beings, and this guy by the name of Sepulveda, who said that, no, Native Americans should not be. And I've got a little kind of poor cartoon here, and I'll let that play for a little bit for y'all.
Do you know who won the first morality debate about European colonization in the New World? Let's take a look at the Valladolid debate of 1550, the first ethics debate of European colonization. In the beginning of the 16th century, Spain began to colonize many parts of the New World. To help with this colonization, Spain instituted the encomienda system, which allowed Spaniards the right to a section of land in the New World, but not only the right to the land, but the labor of the indigenous population living on that land.
Indians.
So essentially, the Spaniard got the land and the people living on the land, and Spain said, this is yours to own. What was the result of the system? The result was widespread abuse and neglect of large populations of indigenous people. And while the encomienda system did encourage colonization, not everyone involved thought it was a good thing. Men like Bartolomé de las Casas began to speak out against the encomienda system and its abuses. In fact, Casas was so successful in his public campaigns against the encomienda system that the King of Spain began to take notice. And by the mid-16th century, the King of Spain instituted reform laws, which reformed the encomienda system to try to curb and end its most notorious abuses. However, just as people spoke out against the encomienda system, there were people speaking for it.
Sad, but
true. A notable
true
advocate for the encomienda system was Juan Sepulveda. The debate over the encomienda system became a very hot topic. And this debate raged on in Spain and in the New World. In fact, by 1550, the King of Spain began an investigation into the morality of Spanish colonization and the encomienda system itself. The king charged Bartolomé de las Casas and Juan Sepulveda to debate in the Spanish court. And this debate would guide Spanish policy going forward. So if the advocates for the encomienda system won, then that system would continue to be reinforced. But if people who spoke out against it won, then the encomienda system would start to be dismantled. It was a very important debate, and the whole country watched it.
And it is mentioned specifically also, make sure you're aware of it.
The encomienda system, since its abuses were so well documented. Sepulveda cited the indigenous people's history of cannibalism and human sacrifice as savage behaviors.
These
And he
people are
said that
brutal,
this behavior was unfit,
therefore
for
they're not
humans,
really
and
humans.
that they needed a European master to rule over them and show them the proper and ethical way to live. Essentially, Sepulveda was saying that the indigenous populations, because of their barbaric practices, were unfit to govern themselves, and they needed a European government to rule over them. Bartolome, on the other hand, argued that the Native Americans were free men deserving of equal treatment. So, who won the debate, and how did this influence Spain's policy of colonization going forward? Both Bartolome and Sepulveda presented their arguments before a Spanish court. The court, after spending many months in deliberation, rendered an inconclusive verdict,
Great.
meaning nobody won. This allowed both Bartolome and Sepulveda to claim victory in the debate,
Number one.
even though neither side
Numero
was
uno.
officially
Numero uno.
acknowledged as the winner. Bartolome saw no end of Spanish colonization of the New World, and Sepulveda didn't see a rescinding of the new laws aimed to reform the encomienda system. Essentially, neither side won nor lost, and not much changed after the debate. The current situation remained as is. While the outcome of the debate was inconclusive, it did establish two important legacies.
There we go.
The first was that Bartolome de las Casas was officially recognized as protector of the Indians. And second, and more important to the context of world and U.S. history, the Valladolid debate was the first European debate about the morality of European colonization of new lands.
And that's like
And
unique,
not
y'all.
only the colonization of those lands, but how the populations in those new lands should be treated. What do you think of both sides of Sepulveda and Bartolome's arguments? Let us know in the comments below.
All right, so there we go, folks. End of story. I'm going to go ahead and cut this off now. All right, and I will post it for you guys to have tomorrow while I am gone. Yeah, escorting the battleship Texas, and hopefully she'll be okay.